Pam Bondi reveals the truth about Elizabeth Warren in court. The verdict sends ripples through the nation, the gavel resounding as the courtroom embraced a heavy silence. Washington, D.C., late afternoon at the Federal Hall of Justice. Sunlight streamed through the towering windows, creating elongated shadows that danced across the gleaming oak benches. Yet, the daylight's brilliance failed to dispel the unease that lingered in every shadow of the room. At the center, the prosecution table exuded a sense of calm as Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida and now the lead special counsel, rose slowly, her hand poised with purpose. A dark folder. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Remain steady. Today transcends the individual, it embodies a recurring theme. A structure designed not for service but to guard against scrutiny stood before the unyielding gaze of Senator Elizabeth Warren, once celebrated as the champion of the people. The accused sat with her hands folded tightly, her expression a mystery. Pam noted that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was established during a crisis, yet it transformed into an entity resistant to oversight. An impenetrable vault designed by none other than Senator Warren. She activated the first exhibit, bringing a projector to life on the screen, displaying a diagram where a bold arrow pointed straight from the Federal Reserve to a CFPB account. No legislative consent, no financial planning, merely an unrestricted flow siphoning off billions. And no one could halt it, not the House, not the Senate, not the taxpayers. A soft whisper flowed through the gallery. Reporters hastily took notes and the judge leaned in with interest. Pam made her way to the center. The figures are clear, $825 million set aside for 2025. Without a vote or discussion, it was simply sanctioned by its very nature. She paused, and Senator Warren didn't merely acknowledge it, she endorsed it. The defense attorney raised an objection. The judge declared that speculation was not to be entertained. Ms. Bondi pressed on. She gave a slight nod. "Allow me to illustrate the essence of approval." Slide to assign the memo regarding the subject from Warren's office. Emergency spending protocol has been dated and stamped. Her signature highlighted in crimson. Pam presented the printed document. This was a deliberate choice. It was a mechanism she controlled, a whisper in the courtroom. Senator Warren's jaw tightened. Pam stepped back up to the podium as the American people made do with less. Expenses for medication increased, making it harder to afford groceries while facing rising rents. Senator Warren's agency allocated millions towards executive travel, public relations campaigns, and communications that were characterized as a strategy for public engagement. Slide 3 features an item labeled perception alignment. They referred to it as outreach, a sum of $3.5 million. It was about managing one's reputation, a moment of stillness, a deep breath. The CFPB failed to safeguard consumers. It was shielding itself from the bench. The judge inquired, "Do you possess direct evidence linking Senator Warren to any personal benefit?" "Indeed, Your Honor." Pam moved to the side as yet another document materialized. Graph slide featuring a single axis. The annual budget of the CFPB in contrast. Elizabeth Warren's net worth increased seamlessly from $12 million to $73 million over the span of a decade. Trust accounts in real estate, lucrative book deals, fees from international speaking engagements, all while overseeing the very sectors from which she gained financially. A fresh tide of whispers. This time, the defense murmured among themselves with greater intensity. "She did not violate any laws," Pam stated as she approached the jury with deliberate steps. "She crafted it to fulfill her needs." A moment of stillness. What we're witnessing goes beyond mere negligence. It's a creation that resembles a shield in design, yet functions with the strength of a fortress. She gestured towards the chart you had purchased. She engaged in the act, that is the reality. Today we unveiled the vault. The judge announced a break in the proceedings. The courtroom hummed with activity, yet Pam stood composed and serene. Outside, the news tickers were already in motion, displaying a continuous stream of information. Warren faces the courtroom drama, Bondi unveils the evidence, and within those walls, the conflict is just heating up. The courtroom was silent, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Not the sort of quiet that arises from reverence, but rather from eager expectation. A weighty revelation loomed on the horizon, and Pam Bondi sensed its approach. She stood up with the composed grace of someone experienced in the courtroom, familiar with the proceedings ahead. This time, the stakes had escalated to a national level. Her gaze swept across the room. The back wall was adorned with media. Observers from Congress lined the benches at the center. Elizabeth Warren positioned herself behind her legal team. No notes, no discernible emotion, merely a slight, strained smile that failed to illuminate her eyes. Pam advanced with purpose. Your Honor, today we unveil the truth. Not a rumor nor based on partisan speculation, but rather a matter of documented and verified public information. She gently tapped her tablet. The main screen behind her illuminated, revealing a flowchart. This represents the financial lifeblood of the CFPB, an agency that operates independently without congressional oversight. The screen magnified, revealing a solitary arrow extending from the Federal Reserve to the Bureau's operating account. Denied. No votes. This, Pam said, her voice tightening, is not a mere oversight. This is an act of bypassing. A wave of whispers swept through the courtroom. Pam tapped once more. Another screen displayed the budget breakdowns, confidential communications, records of travel expenditures. One chart stood out, the alignment of communications and perception. 3.5 million. She faced the judge. That's a reference to image management rather than policy, enforcement, or public relations. The following slide elicited a chorus of gasps. High-level travel, $1.2 million in a single fiscal year. She hesitated. The courtroom at the dock reached a resolution. She pressed on. And this is where the figures align with the identities. A spreadsheet emerged, marked in red with real estate trust accounts and personal earnings. Senator Elizabeth Warren has disclosed her income, which includes a Senate salary of $174,000 and a net worth estimated between $12 million and $73 million. Warren maintained her composure, yet her attorney fidgeted in his chair. Pam continued. What you observe here isn't inherently unlawful, yet when viewed through the lens of regulatory exceptions, preferential treatment of donors, and timing, it reveals a discernible pattern, one of gaining wealth through influence. The room was now captivated by every word she crafted as she championed the autonomy of the CFPB. She shielded it from responsibility and reaped the rewards of its structure. Pam clicked again. A side-by-side graph appeared displaying the CFPB's annual budget from 2011 to 2024 on the right. Warren announced assets while the lines reflected one another during that period. She accepted the system without resistance. Pam mentioned that she created a new one that circumvented Congress and ensured its own protection. She hesitated. Esteemed audience, let me assure you, this is not a mere conspiracy. This is documentation. This is how corruption remains exposed in plain sight. It conceals itself within the process. The concluding slide for the day was straightforward in email format, featuring a date and timestamp authenticated by an advocacy group linked to a significant financial exemption addressed to a senior CFPB official regarding the subject. Thank you for granting access. Excited for the upcoming quarter. Pam's voice lowered. This was never about safeguarding the interests of consumers. It revolved around accessibility. It was about creating a framework resilient to adversity. Up until this moment, the judge has declared a recess. Elizabeth Warren rose deliberately, her stance upright yet taut outside the courthouse. The throngs had increased. Some displayed signs bearing slogans such as justice for the middle class. Voices rose in unison declaring an end to royal influence in governance. Pam Bondi slipped out through the side, evading the cameras, yet the reporters pursued her relentlessly. Miss Bondi, are you suggesting that Senator Warren has engaged in unlawful activities? She glanced momentarily at the camera and stated, I'm not accusing. I am demonstrating my progress one record at a time. Then she vanished into the night. The media divided CNN. Pam Bondi's battle against bureaucracy. Fox Warren faces trial. The empire fractures. Social media surged dramatically. Access gate for hashtags. Hashtag CFPB fall number Warren, and one that gained more traction than the others. The political forums on Reddit ignited with fervent discussions surrounding the trial of truth. At last, we have a focus on data rather than just catchy phrases. She turned reform into a powerful tool. That's more egregious than corruption. It's a profound act of treachery. Pam Bondi observed the feeds in silence from her office. Her lips remained uncurled. She flipped open the next binder, ready to dive into day 3. The courtroom reopened in silence. Yet the air was thick with palpable tension. It was clear to all what lay ahead. Day 3 focused on clarity. It revolved around validation. The defense had not yet provided a substantial response. Now it was Pam Bondi's moment to seize the opportunity. She stepped in with the same understated confidence as before, a slender folder held in one hand. The judge acknowledged with a nod. She stepped onto the stage. We now shift our focus. She started to explore the intricacies of collusion. The screen behind her glowed with an intricate web of diagrams, linking nonprofits, shell organizations, and government offices, all converging towards a central hub. Pam highlighted the CFPB. This illustrates the way influences are sanitized within bureaucratic systems. Indeed, it is lawful, morally complex, contentious, clear as day, not even in the ballpark. She clicked once more. A document emerged. A form for distributing grants from a French environmental nonprofit to a U.S. advocacy organization. The recipient subsequently enjoyed favorable consideration in CFPB regulations. According to Pam, Senator Warren has referred to this as international cooperation. However, the timeline suggests a different story. Resources drift in supervision. When the next slide hits harder, the relaxed correlation transforms into causation. A $5.1 million contribution from a trust based in Hong Kong comes just weeks ahead of the CFPB lifting sanctions against a collaborating bank. No elaboration needed. Absence of an audit trail. A sudden twist left everyone breathless, the air thick with astonishment. Pam observed that the CFPB exercised a level of discretion typically associated with royalty, rather than that of public servants. She pressed the screen once more. At the heart of each exemption, each unspoken endorsement, and every concealed memo stood Senator Elizabeth Warren. The defense awakened for the first time. Warren's attorney raised an objection to the speculation. The judge addressed the Bondi counselor directly. Kindly limit your comments to substantiated facts. Pam nodded, fully ready and well prepared. She showcased a memo adorned with Elizabeth Warren's digital signature at the bottom. The document clearly delineates a procedural fast track for compliance waivers. And this is not mere speculation. Pam mentioned the need for authorization. A new document surfaced in the internal communications from the communications director of the CFPB. Maintain focus in accordance with Senator Warren's reform. The narrative reduced the conversation surrounding exempted donors. Silence enveloped the courtroom. Bondi approached the bench with deliberate intent. This was not governance. The cost was borne by the American people, all in the name of public relations. The judge announced a short break in the proceedings. Warren stood still, a statue in the moment. Yet the flush on her cheeks revealed her emotions as she stood outside the courthouse steps, overwhelmed. Demonstrators raised their voices against opposing groups, flags fluttering in the air, while media vehicles lined the streets in double rows. The entire nation was captivated as a new witness took the stand. Russell V.A., the former director of the Office of Management and Budget. Mr. V.A. Bondi inquired whether you were ever informed about the CFPB's circumvention of congressional review. He carefully repositioned his glasses. Never did you find the structure surprising. It functioned like a self-sufficient FFTM, with oversight on the exemptions clearly defined. He paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Ultimately, every path converges at Senator Warren's office. Pam allowed that to linger in the atmosphere. Then she revealed the last creation of the day. An exclusive correspondence between Warren and her policy director. The subject line stated "Safeguard the pipeline." She emphasized one line in particular. The exemptions are lost to us. We are losing the donors. Pam faced the judge. Your Honor, this is not simply a matter of failure. It's intentional. The gavel fell, signaling the end of the day's proceedings. The media captured their snippet. And Pam Bondi had just transformed the trial from mere suspicion into undeniable certainty. That evening, news networks erupted. MSNBC reported on Warren facing an email firestorm, while Fox covered the pipeline of power. Bondi ignites a frenzy as social media erupts once more. Pipeline proof number aligns with the funds number that Warren X revealed, alongside another tag that surged to the top. Bondi dissects it on the dark edge of D.C., within a war room filled with political strategists. Silence enveloped the room as they refrained from formulating a reply. They were assessing the odds of survival. The trial had evolved beyond the mere focus on a senator. For the first time, the system found itself on the losing side. The courtroom simmered with palpable tension. The noise from outside had intensified, drowning out the sounds within. Each breath seemed deliberate, every gaze locked onto the podium where Pam Bondi remained resolute. She had seized the reins of the story in Part 3, and now she would sharpen the edge, transforming evidence into undeniable truth and truth into a moment of legal consequence. The judge peered over the rims of his glasses. "Miss Bondi, please continue with the next exhibit." She nodded, and a new slide emerged on the courtroom's monitor, displaying a table that outlined crucial financial transactions between CFPB-affiliated nonprofits and shell organizations that funneled millions from foreign donors. Pam remained unfazed. "This, Your Honor, is not a matter of politics. It's a path of concealment." The CFPB transcended its role as merely a regulatory entity. It was a financial valve, subtly releasing accountability from this republic, like gas escaping from the public gallery. Pam allowed it to linger before moving on to the next slide. Exhibit 14. The Hong Kong pipeline revealed a network of accounts, all linked to a single entity, a trust based in Hong Kong, with direct financial ties to a regulatory advisory board under the CFPB's umbrella, amounting to $5.1 million. She stated with composure that this trust was transferred to an American advocacy group, which 2 months later obtained regulatory exemption status from the CFPB, approved by none other than the defendant herself. Senator Elizabeth Warren's whispers escalated into a clear expression of anger. The judge brought down his gavel, signaling order in the courtroom. Pam continued to assert that if any private corporation funneled money from a foreign entity to secure special favor from a regulator, it would be labeled as bribery. Yet, cloaked in the guise of progressive leadership, it was presented to the public as an act of compassion. She pivoted gently, directing her gaze straight at the jury. This goes beyond mere hypocrisy. It concerns a facade of belief that conceals a deeper protection. The atmosphere shifted with the change in prosecution. Pam had moved beyond merely scrutinizing a system. She was expressing it. The prosecution team, fueled by Bondi's unwavering determination, stepped forward and presented Exhibit 17. A chart illustrated the real estate timeline of Elizabeth Warren over the past 12 years, set alongside the increase in the CFPB's annual operating budget. The curved lines reflected one another, moving in perfect harmony like dance partners in sync. Pam cast a quick look at it before speaking. "Your Honor, the timeline aligns perfectly with each regulatory expansion." The defendant's fortune expanded as smaller banks faced overwhelming burdens from compliance fees. Senator Warren was in the process of acquiring beachfront property through a blind trust. She faced the defense table. Warren sat, his jaw set tight. Her legal team murmured anxiously. The rules she established did not safeguard the American people. Pam mentioned that they faced consequences from them. Exhibit 19. Communications and Concealment. Next, Pam disclosed a confidential internal memo from the CFPB dated 2 years earlier which outlined strategies to evade audits by categorizing expenses as engagement strategies. Accompanying this were invoices for extravagant retreats, executive travel, and perception alignment. Consultants Pam recited a quote that emphasizes the importance of seeming to oversee while still allowing for operational freedom. That's a convoluted system designed to obscure the truth. In the stillness, a soft buzz arose as the press gallery hurried to share their thoughts. The judge appeared clearly unsettled. "Miss Bondi," he inquired, "do you possess any corroboration that the defendant was aware of these concealments?" Pam beamed with delight. "I certainly do." She tapped her clicker, and Exhibit 21 appeared on the screen, a scanned directive featuring Elizabeth Warren's signature, complete with a timestamp and authorization. A line read, "Reclassify travel expenses under strategic alignment to avoid disclosure triggers." The courtroom held its breath as Pam stepped away from the podium, allowing the weight of that evidence to shatter the illusion of credibility. The defense falters as Warren's team seeks to shift the narrative. "Your Honor," her lead counsel asserts that context is essential given that these actions unfolded within a complicated regulatory landscape following the crisis. Objection. Pam snapped. "Not context cover." The judge raised his brows. Sustained. Pam continued walking slowly, letting each word find its mark. "Every institution in this country must abide by the law. Every citizen pays their taxes, but this agency created an exception for itself built by the defendant, enforced by her allies, and shielded from scrutiny by fear-mongering about consumer protection. She turned toward the judge again. This isn't just fraud, Your Honor, it's betrayal dressed in policy. Public outcry becomes public will outside the courthouse. Something had changed. The protest lines were gone. In their place, a crowd had gathered, not chanting but listening, watching the live feed from inside. Citizens holding signs not of party but of purpose. Show us the books, laws for all, equal accountability. Inside the courtroom took a break. Pam sat alone at the prosecution table, sipping water. Across from her, Warren stared forward, unreadable, but something in her eyes had shifted. Not arrogance, not anger, fear. The whisper as the recess ended and the court reconvened. A courtroom technician handed the judge a USB received anonymously. He said, verified, clean. The judge looked at Bondi. Do you know what this contains? Pam nodded. I believe so. She stepped to the screen again. Your Honor, this file contains audio recorded at an internal CFPB strategy session. Play it. The courtroom fell silent as the recording played. We can't win hearts, so we win the system. Let them vote. We already picked the winners. Another voice replied, are we still routing approvals through the Federal Reserve? Then a third, of course, Congress is a formality. The audio clicked off. The silence was explosive. Pam stood still, then said, ladies and gentlemen, the court has heard the confession. Now it must deliver the consequence. The verdict looms as the sun began to set outside. Its glow reached into the courtroom, casting long shadows. Pam looked toward the jury. This is more than corruption. It's systemized indifference crafted by a senator who swore to serve the people but chose instead to serve the architecture of control. She paused. No more two sets of rules, no more silent empires. Today we choose justice. The gavel hit once more. We will reconvene tomorrow for closing statements. But everyone knew the closing had already begun. The courtroom air had shifted, not from sound but from a slow creeping awareness that this wasn't just a case, this was the beginning of an avalanche. Pam Bondi stood at the prosecution table, unwavering. The lights overhead glared down like interrogators, but she welcomed the heat. It meant they were listening. Judge Morrison leaned slightly forward, tapping his pen slowly against the wood. Miss Bondi, please proceed. Pam walked to the center of the courtroom, voice even but steely. Your Honor, members of the jury, today you saw the receipts. Tomorrow you'll see the motive, but right now you're going to see the network. She clicked the remote in her hand. The monitors came alive. An intricate diagram lit up the courtroom, glowing with a web of names, organizations, bank transfers, nonprofit shells, and PACs. At the center, Elizabeth Warren. Let me be clear, Pam continued, this is not speculation. These are confirmed financial connections tied to the CFPB and external advocacy groups that receive favorable treatment from regulations pushed or influenced by the defendant. She let the silence draw in, then clicked again. Transaction 1.47, a 2.4 million wire from Elix International, a French-based environmental nonprofit, to Citizens for Fiscal Equity. Sounds noble, doesn't it, until you learn that CF appeared in CFPB documentation as a consulting partner for a consumer education initiative. No open bidding, no competing proposals. The courtroom was silent save for the frantic scribbling of pens and the occasional intake of breath. Then she continued, voice rising just enough to build suspense. Transaction hashtag 20,951 million, originating from a Hong Kong-based trust connected to a banking institution under review by the CFPB. 2 weeks later, case closed. No penalty. From the gallery, a reporter coughed. Stunned, Bondi didn't flinch. We're not talking about donations, we're talking influence for sale policy carved out and sold by those sworn to protect the public interest. The defense shifted. Elizabeth Warren stared straight ahead, unmoving. Her attorney whispered something, but she didn't respond. A faint sheen of sweat had formed along her brow. Pam continued, now slower, more surgical. When you create an agency without oversight, funded outside congressional approval, operating in legal gray zones, you don't get innovation, you get insulation. And when that insulation wraps around one person, the architect, the champion, the de facto queen of regulatory escape hatches, you no longer have a watchdog, you have a gatekeeper. She tapped again. The screen split. On one side, Elizabeth Warren's net worth chart from 2005 to 2024. On the other, the growth of CFPB's discretionary budget. Both graphs climbed an eerie dot on unison. This isn't a coincidence, it's correlation with causation, Pam declared. Judge Morrison narrowed his eyes. Juror number 7, a teacher from Iowa, leaned forward, mouth slightly open. This wasn't dry numbers anymore, it was motive, it was a blueprint. And what did she do with this access? Pam continued, she built an empire. Pam turned away from the screen and looked directly at the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, the CFPB was used as a laundering mechanism, not for illegal currency, for power, for political reach. It was A bank vault for regulatory influence. She paused and Senator Warren held the master key. The courtroom murmured. Pam walked back toward the witness box. The next to testify was one of Warren's former legislative aides under subpoena. State your name. For the Benjamin Ryland, former Special Policy Advisor, Office of Senator Elizabeth Warren. Mr. Ryland, were you aware of any communications between the senator and outside groups that were seeking regulatory favor? Yes, ma'am. And did she ever direct you to prioritize those groups in legislation or policy briefs? He hesitated. The room held its breath. She didn't say it outright, but it was clear. Emails, calls, priorities shifting without explanation. You didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes. Pam nodded, then showed one of those emails from Elizabeth WGV to policy staff at SI8 Gov. Subject: fast track suggestions. Let's find a way to get them to the front of the line. The screen flicked off. Pam turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is not a theory. This is not a political attack. This is a systemic breach of fiduciary duty by an elected official entrusted with public good. Then her voice dropped. It is betrayal. The final session of the trial began under heavy skies. Both literal and symbolic rain tapped against the grand windows of the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., and the nation watched, breath held, as Special Prosecutor Pam Bondi prepared to deliver her closing argument in what had become the most consequential trial in modern American history. Elizabeth Warren, once a towering figure of progressive politics, sat in silence at the defendant's table, her once fiery demeanor hollowed into stilly stillness. Across the courtroom, Bondi stood poised, folders neatly arranged, every paper in order. The gallery was full. Senators, journalists, and public observers. Cameras were banned, but the world waited outside, refreshing live blogs and news feeds by the second. Your Honor, members of the jury, Bondi began, her voice steady. Today is not just about one woman, it is about the truth, about what happens when those entrusted with power turn it into private currency, when the law is bent so quietly